The air tasted of copper and ozone. Queen Zalareth stood motionless at the edge of her viewing platform. Every muscle in her serpentine frame held rigid beneath ceremonial plates. Below her, in the circular arena of black stone, two figures moved in the dying light of the execution lamps. One crawled, one watched. Her translator chirped softly, catching the broken sounds from below. Please. Commander Vorak had been her finest general. 3 campaigns, 17 worlds subdued without orbital bombardment, a warrior whose strategic brilliance had reshaped the outer territories into profitable colonies. His scales had once gleamed like polished obsidian. Now they hung loose, revealing the gray flesh beneath. Please. The human stood 3 paces away. He wore no armor, no weapon harness, just the simple dark uniform of the diplomatic corps, slightly rumpled at the shoulders. His hands remained at his sides. His face, those strange flat features that her xenobiologists still struggled to read, showed nothing. Vorak dragged himself forward another half-length. The sound of his claws scraping stone echoed through the vaulted chamber. I beg you. Zalareth's throat sacs tightened. Protocol demanded she remain silent. Demanded she witness without interference. The human had invoked right of judgment under the Treaty of Fallen Sons. No royal, no council, no power in the assembled territories could intercede once that ancient law was spoken. But this was Vorak. End it. The general's voice cracked. His breathing came in wet, labored gasps. Please? I know what I did. I accept punishment. But end it. Have mercy. The human's eyes never left Vorak's face. Those small, strange eyes with white showing all around. Prey eyes, her military advisors had called them. Weak eyes. They didn't look weak now. No. The single word dropped into silence like a stone into deep water. Vorak shuddered. His secondary arms folded against his torso, the traditional gesture of submission. I am begging. Kill me. I will not resist. I will... no. Zalareth's claws dug into the rail. She had seen executions. She had ordered executions. Death was clean. Death was simple. This was something else entirely. What I did to your colony? Vorak's words tumbled out now, desperate and quick. I know. The settlements. The children. I was following orders, but that doesn't... it doesn't... Stop talking. The human's voice remained level, almost gentle. That made it worse. Vorak collapsed completely, his body flat against the stone. Then what? What do you want? You already know. The general's whole frame began to shake, not from pain. Zalareth had seen enough wounded warriors to recognize fear when it manifested. This was terror on a level she'd rarely witnessed, the kind that unmade a person from the inside. I can't, Vorak whispered. You can. The treatment will take years. The rehabilitation, the psychological, 10 years minimum. The human finally moved, taking one small step forward. Just one. Probably longer. You'll spend them in a human rehabilitation facility. No diplomatic protections. No special accommodations. You'll face every survivor who wants to speak to you. You'll attend every memorial. You'll learn every name. That's torture. That's justice. Zalareth's translator struggled with the emotion in the human's voice. The words came through clearly enough, but something beneath them, some quality her technology couldn't quantify, made her breathing passages constrict. I would rather die, Vorak said. I know. You're a monster. Maybe. The human tilted his head slightly. But I'm not going to give you the easy way out. You're going to live with what you did. You're going to remember. And maybe somewhere in those years you're going to understand. Understand what? What it means to be alive after everything's been taken from you. The words hung in the air like smoke. Zalareth's intelligence networks had provided extensive files on humanity. Their rapid technological development, their peculiar social structures, their tendency toward pack bonding and protective aggression. But nothing in those files had prepared her for this. Death she understood. Combat she understood. This calculated mercy that looked like cruelty, this refusal to grant the release of ending, this was alien in ways that terrified her. Vorak lay motionless now, not unconscious, defeated in a way that mere battle could never achieve. The human turned, acknowledging the throne platform for the first time. He didn't bow. Didn't kneel, Just met her gaze directly, those prey eyes steady and calm. "Your Majesty," he said, "my government's transport will arrive in 4 hours. I'll take custody then." Zalorth found her voice. "This is unprecedented. Yes, your species is young."
"New to the territories. You should not possess such authority."
"We negotiated for it." His expression remained neutral. "After what happened, your council agreed to our terms." She wanted to argue. Wanted to revoke the agreement, invoke some ancient privilege, anything to restore the familiar order where execution was final and punishment was clean. But the treaty held. And beneath her royal fury, something else stirred. Something that watched this strange human and wondered what kind of species created justice that hurt more than death. What kind of species refused mercy to make a point? What kind of species had just arrived in the galaxy, and what would it mean for all of them? Hashtag extraction protocol. The human remained standing in the execution chamber, his dark uniform somehow absorbing the pale light rather than reflecting it. Zalorth watched his breathing pattern, slow, controlled, nothing like the rapid panting that fear or aggression produced in most species. Her own respiratory rhythm felt chaotic by comparison. "You comprehend what you're choosing," she said. It wasn't quite a question. The human, Ambassador Chen, according to the files, nodded once. Completely. Execution would satisfy the treaty requirements. The survivor testimonies documented 17 instances of civilian targeting. Under territorial law, a swift death would be considered appropriate closure. For who? The question made her pause. Her throat sacs fluttered involuntarily. For the victims, for their families, for the assembled territory's sense of justice. Not for the victims. Chen's voice carried no heat, no accusation. "Just statement, we asked them..." "Interviewed every survivor, every family member who'd speak to us. You know what the majority said?" Zalorth didn't respond. Her intelligence services had monitored those interviews. The transcript still sat unread in her private files, marked with priority flags she'd been avoiding for weeks. They said they wanted him to understand. Chen shifted his weight, the first unnecessary movement he'd made since entering the chamber. Not die. Not be forgotten. Not become some martyr or cautionary tale. They wanted him to carry it, every day, every moment. That is revenge, not justice. Maybe there's no difference. He glanced back at Vorak's motionless form. Or maybe there is, and I'm too angry to see it yet. Either way, this is what the humans of Colony 7 requested. This is what we're honoring. Zalorth descended 3 steps. Protocol violation. She shouldn't move closer during a formal judgment. Her royal guard tensed, sensory stalks rising, but she raised one hand and they stilled. "Your species arrived in this sector 16 standard years ago," she said. "You possessed faster-than-light capability for barely 3 decades before that. You are children in galactic terms. Yes, yet you speak of justice with the authority of ancient civilizations. You invoke treaties our ancestors wrote before your world discovered fire. How do you reconcile this arrogance?" "It's not arrogance." Chen met her gaze without flinching. "Remarkable. Considering her full height gave her nearly 2 meters advantage, it's desperation." "We're new here, Your Majesty. We're weak. We have 12 colonies, and none of them have proper defensive systems yet. We can't threaten anyone militarily. We can't enforce anything through strength." "Then why did my council grant you these rights?" "Because we understand something about being vulnerable." His jaw tightened. She'd learned that expression meant suppressed emotion. "We've had enough wars on our homeworld, enough genocides. Enough moments where someone powerful looked at someone weak and decided that weak meant disposable." Vorak stirred slightly, a soft groan escaping his translator. Chen continued without looking away from her. "So when your general attacked Colony 7 and killed 4,000 civilians, including 816 children, we had a choice. We could demand war. We could scream for blood. We could burn diplomatic bridges we desperately need. Or we could make this hurt in a way that matters. Make it so expensive, not in money or resources, but in conscience, that it doesn't happen again. To us. To anyone." Zalorth felt her inner eyelids flicker. A stress response she couldn't quite control. "You believe shame will protect you better than weapons? I believe attention will. Every species in the territories is watching this right now. Your council knows it. We know it. They're seeing how the humans handle a crisis. Whether we collapse, whether we rage, whether we accept the easy answers. And what answer are you providing? That we remember. Chen's voice dropped lower. That we document. That we make the cost of harming us so personally devastating that even when we can't retaliate militarily, the price isn't worth paying. The logic struck her like a physical force. Humans couldn't build dreadnoughts fast enough to matter, couldn't establish territorial dominance, couldn't project power across the stars the way older civilizations did, but they could make themselves into a moral hazard, a species that turned suffering into unending accountability. Clever, horrifying, effective. You're weaponizing mercy, she said quietly, if that's what it takes. Chen finally broke eye contact, looking down at Vorak. He'll live in a facility on humanity's third colony. Medium security, therapeutic staff, full documentation of every session. Survivors can visit whenever they want. Media can interview him quarterly. His rehabilitation progress will be public record. You're making an exhibition of his punishment. I'm making a record. When the next commander from the next species looks at a human colony and thinks about whether civilian casualties are acceptable losses, they'll remember what happened to Vorak. They'll remember that humans don't forget. Don't forgive easily. Don't let things end clean. Zareth moved down 2 more steps, close enough now that her royal guard actually shifted into protective positions. Close enough to see the fine lines around Chen's eyes, the slight tremor in his left hand that he kept carefully still against his leg. He was terrified. Maintaining that calm facade through sheer discipline, but terrified nonetheless. You fear me? She observed. Yes. Yet you stand here refusing to compromise. Yes. Why? Because I'm more afraid of failing the people I represent. His voice wavered slightly. Because those 4,000 civilians trusted their government to protect them and we failed. Because 816 children died while we were signing trade agreements and cultural exchange papers. Because if I don't do this right, more will die, and I'll have to live with that too. There was the edge beneath the diplomatic language. Chen wasn't just executing policy. He was drowning in the same weight he wanted Vorak to carry. You will not survive long in galactic politics, Zarlith said. This kind of moral position requires strength you don't possess. Maybe. Chen straightened his shoulders. But we only need to survive long enough to matter. Long enough that attacking humans means more than a calculated military risk. It means carrying someone like Vorak for a decade. It means endless documentation and survivor testimonies and psychological evaluations. It means the whole galaxy watching you break down slowly instead of dying quick. Cruel. Necessary. A long silence stretched between them. In the arena below, Vorak had begun weeping, a strange clicking sound that the translator rendered as desperate sobs. The general who had commanded fleets now reduced to tears by the simple promise of having to face consequences. Zalrith had ordered deaths before. Swift, clean, appropriate to the crime. This felt different, wrong in ways she couldn't articulate, but also she forced herself to think it through. Potentially effective in ways traditional justice never achieved. 4 hours, Chen said again. The transport arrives then. I assume you'll want to complete the transfer documentation before then. Yes. Her voice came out rougher than intended. Ambassador Chen, Your Majesty, don't mistake my compliance for approval. He nodded slowly. I wouldn't dream of it. The weight of names, the documentation chamber sat adjacent to the execution arena, its walls lined with crystalline memory storage that glowed faintly blue. Zalrith's chief administrator, a methodical Velthar named Kess, had prepared 3 data tablets worth of transfer protocols. Each page required authentication, verification, counter-verification. Chen signed them without reading. You should review the terms, Kess said, her 8 fingers tapping nervously against the tablet surface. Several clauses grant you custody powers that supersede normal diplomatic protections. If Vorak becomes violent, if he refuses treatment, if he won't refuse. Chen accepted another tablet, pressed his thumb to the biometric scanner. He's already broken. That's the whole point? Zalith observed from her position near the chamber's entrance. She dismissed most of her guard, keeping only her personal shield-bearer, a silent warrior named Thex who'd served 3 generations of her bloodline. His presence was more psychological comfort than practical protection. Something about this human-made traditional security feel insufficient. The survivor testimonies, she said abruptly. You mentioned interviewing them. I want to understand the process. Chen paused mid-signature. Why? Because I need to know if this is justice or performance art. He set down the tablet carefully. 3 of our diplomatic staff spent 2 months on Colony 7. They spoke with anyone willing to talk. Recorded everything. 2,000 hours of testimony. And they all wanted this? No. Chen's expression tightened. About 40% wanted him dead. Quick execution, no ceremony. Another 30% wanted him tried, imprisoned, forgotten. 20% didn't want to engage at all. Too traumatized, too grief-stricken. That leaves 10%. The 10% who wanted him to live with it. Chen met her gaze directly, and those were the ones who convinced us. Not through anger. Through their clarity, Kess handed him another tablet. He signed it without breaking eye contact. One woman, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, lost her husband and both children. She was off colony when the attack happened. Came back to find her entire family vaporized in the initial bombardment. Do you know what she said? Zarla's throat sacs contracted. Tell me. She said killing him would let him escape. That death was too simple, too final. She wanted him to wake up every day and remember. She wanted him to see images of the children he killed. She wanted him to attend memorials. She wanted him to understand that every person wasn't a strategic target or acceptable collateral damage. They were real, individual. Irreplaceable. That's torture. She called it education. Chen's voice remained level. She said maybe, somewhere in all that remembering, he might become the kind of person who understands why what he did was wrong, not just against military law or treaty obligations. Actually wrong. Kess made a soft clicking sound, concern or confusion. But, Ambassador, most criminals never develop such understanding. Rehabilitation success rates across the territories average below 30%. You're condemning yourself to managing a hostile prisoner for a decade with minimal chance of actual reform.
I know. Then why? Because the alternative is letting him die believing he was just following orders?
Just making hard tactical choices in a complex situation. Chen's hands curled into fists at his sides, and if we let him keep that belief, if we let him escape into death still thinking he was fundamentally right, then we've told every other commander in the galaxy that human lives don't matter enough to challenge their assumptions. Zalrith moved closer. The documentation chamber felt suddenly claustrophobic despite its vaulted ceiling. You're betting an enormous amount of political capital on a psychological theory. Yes, if Vorak never breaks. If he maintains his moral certainty through the entire rehabilitation. If the survivors spend a decade reliving trauma without any sense of closure. If other species see this as weakness rather than strength, what then? Chen was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made even Thek shift uncomfortably. Then we fail. Spectacularly. Publicly. And we find another way. But at least we tried something other than adding more bodies to the pile. Idealism? Zalrith said softly. Desperation, he corrected. I keep telling you, we're not strong enough for idealism. This is pure survival strategy, dressed up in moral language. Kess presented the final tablet. Chen took it, but didn't immediately sign. Instead, he pulled a small datapad from his uniform pocket. Civilian tech? Zalrith noted. Not military issue. The screen flickered to life. 816 children, he said quietly. We have names for 793 of them. The other 23 were too young. Refugees who arrived at Colony 7 without proper documentation or born in transit. He scrolled slowly through the list. Names in various human languages, scripts that zealous translators struggled to parse. Chen's thumb moved with practiced ease like he'd read this list many times before. Emma, 5 years old, loved drawing pictures of spacecraft. Scroll, Marcus 12 years old. Top of his class in xenobiology? Scroll. Yuki, 8 years old, wanted to be a doctor. Ambassador, Zalrith started. Jamal, 6 years old. First generation born off Earth. Chen, please, I'm not stopping. His voice never rose, but something in it made the chamber feel colder. Vorak is going to learn every name, every age, every detail we have about who they were. That's part of his rehabilitation. If I can carry this list, so can he. He kept scrolling. Kept reading. Kess turned away, her sensory stalks drooping. Even Thex, trained to maintain perfect professional distance, shifted his weight uncomfortably. Zalrith listened. Every name, every small detail about lives cut short. The weight of it accumulated in the chamber like physical mass. Chen's voice never wavered, but she saw his hand trembling slightly as he scrolled. Saw the way his jaw clenched between names. This was killing him. And he was doing it anyway. When he finally reached the end of the list, the silence felt absolute. Chen closed the datapad with a soft click that seemed impossibly loud. "That's why," he said quietly. "That's why we're not executing him. Because someone needs to remember them as people, not as casualties. And I'd rather it be the person who killed them than letting them fade into statistical footnotes." He signed the final tablet with steady hands, despite the tremor. Passed it to Kess without ceremony. 3 hours until transport arrives, he said. "I'll need to examine the prisoner. Verify he's fit for travel." "He's fit." Zolarth's voice came out rougher than intended. "Our medical staff confirmed it. I need to see for myself. That's not protocol. Protocol is whatever the treaty says it is." Chen's eyes met hers again. "And the treaty gives me custody rights, which means I verify his condition personally." It wasn't a request. Zolarth gestured to Thex, who moved to the chamber door and opened it with a pneumatic hiss. The corridor beyond led back to the execution arena, back to where Vorak still lay, broken and weeping. "After you," she said. Chen walked past her without hesitation. She caught the scent of him. Strange human pheromones that her biology couldn't quite parse. Something sharp, something that might have been fear or determination or grief. Perhaps it was all three. They walked in silence through the corridor, their footsteps echoing off polished stone. Kess followed at a respectful distance, clutching her tablets. Thex brought up the rear, his weapon harness clicking softly with each movement. When they emerged into the arena, Vorak looked up. His eyes, once sharp and calculating, showed nothing but hollow desperation. "You," he croaked, seeing Chen. "You came back. I told you I would. To kill me? No." Vorak's entire body sagged. Chen approached until he stood directly over the fallen general, close enough that any sudden movement could be dangerous. But Vorak didn't move. Couldn't move, perhaps. Chen crouched down, bringing his face level with Vorak's. "Do you remember their names?" "Do you remember any of their names?" Vorak's expression flickered. No, they were tactical casualties. I didn't have access to civilian registries." "Emma," Chen said quietly. "Marcus, Yuki, Jamal. Would you like me to continue?" "Please don't. Too late." Chen's voice remained soft, almost gentle. "You're going to learn every single one. That's part of your rehabilitation." Medical verification. Chen pulled a small scanner from his uniform pocket. Civilian medical equipment, not military grade, but sufficient for basic biometric readings. He ran it over Vorak's prone form with practiced efficiency, watching the data stream across a tiny display screen. "Heart rate elevated but stable," he murmured. Neural activity shows stress patterns but no critical damage. Respiratory function compromised but adequate." "I examined him myself," Zolarth said from her position several paces away. "My chief medical officer verified his fitness for transport 3 hours ago." "I'm sure she did." Chen moved the scanner along Vorak's spine where the scales hung loose. "But I need to confirm he can survive the trip to human space. If he dies en route, this entire process becomes meaningless."
Vorak laughed, a broken, rattling sound. "Meaningless. That's perfect."
"My whole life reduced to whether I can survive long enough to be tortured properly. Not torture." Chen set the scanner aside and gently pressed 2 fingers against Vorak's neck, checking pulse manually. "Rehabilitation. What's the difference? Intent." Chen's hands were steady despite everything, professional medical training overriding personal emotion. Torture is about inflicting pain for its own sake. Rehabilitation is about helping you become someone who understands why what you did was wrong. I already know it was wrong. No, you know it broke treaty law. You know it resulted in consequences for you. That's not the same thing." Chen withdrew his hands and stood. "But you're going to learn the difference." Eventually, Zolarth watched this interaction with growing unease. Chen moved with the confidence of someone who'd done medical examinations countless times, checking reflexes, testing response time, evaluating psychological state through subtle questions and observations. Not just a diplomat, someone with field experience. "You have medical training," she observed. 8 years as a colony doctor before I joined the diplomatic corps." Chen made a notation on his datapad. "Colony 4, mostly emergency medicine. Learn to assess trauma quickly." "And what made you leave medicine for politics?" Politics is just medicine on a larger scale. He crouched beside Vorak again, this time checking the general's secondary arms for range of motion. Instead of healing individual bodies, you try to heal relationships between species. Prevent conflicts before they metastasize. Sometimes you fail and have to manage the aftermath. Like now. Like now, Vorak winced as Chen manipulated his left secondary arm. You're hurting me. I'm checking for nerve damage. If your motor function is compromised, we need to address it before transport. The journey takes 40 hours, even with our fastest ships. I don't want to go. I know. Chen set the arm down gently. But you don't get a choice. Neither of us do, really. The survivors made their request. The treaty supports it. We're all just following through. Following through on cruelty. Chen was quiet for a moment, then pulled a small data chip from his pocket. He held it up where Vorak could see it. This contains 347 video messages from Colony 7 survivors. People who wanted you to hear directly from them.
Wanted you to see their faces while they talk about who they lost.
Vorak's eyes widened. No, I don't want... You're going to watch every single one. Chen tucked the chip back into his pocket. That's part of Week 1 orientation. You'll sit in a quiet room with a counselor present, and you'll watch them all. No skipping? No looking away? If you close your eyes, we pause until you open them again. That's torture. That's testimony. Chen stood, brushing dust from his uniform. Those people have the right to be seen by you, to have their grief acknowledged by the person who caused it. You can call it whatever you want, but it's happening regardless. Zalareth felt her throat sacs flutter again. The casual cruelty of it, not physical violence, not degradation, but simply forcing Vorak to witness the full consequences of his actions, struck her as somehow worse than execution. This would extend for years. And yet, she thought about the names Chen had recited. 816 children. Each one a person. Each one with family. Each one mattering to someone's subject. How many times had she approved military actions without considering such details? How many casualties existed in her own empire's records as numbers rather than names? Your Majesty, Thex said quietly. The prisoner appears agitated. Should I intervene? She glanced at Vorak, who had begun trembling violently. Not from pain, his species' stress responses were different, and she recognized the signs of psychological breakdown. No, she said. Let Ambassador Chen continue his examination. Chen had moved on to checking Vorak's cranial plates, looking for concussion damage or neural trauma. His hands were surprisingly gentle despite the clinical efficiency, bruising around the sensory stalks, but nothing that indicates permanent damage. Vision tracking normal. Cognitive responses delayed, but that's expected given stress levels. I answered your questions already, Vorak gasped. Your medical review. I told you I was fit for transport. You told my preliminary assessment team. I need to verify personally. Chen pulled out a small light, shining it in Vorak's eyes, one at a time. Pupil response good. No signs of internal bleeding or pressure damage. You'll survive the journey. Survive. Vorak's voice broke. For what? So I can spend 10 years being broken down piece by piece? So you can spend 10 years understanding what you did? Chen clicked off the light. There's a difference. You keep saying that, but it sounds like torture no matter how you phrase it. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then he sat down fully on the stone floor, cross-legged, bringing himself completely level with Vorak's prone position. The informality of it shocked Zalareth. Diplomats didn't sit during formal proceedings, and certainly not on arena floors. Let me tell you about Dr. Mitchell, Chen said quietly. The woman I mentioned earlier. She lost everything in your attack. I don't want to hear. She came to our diplomatic offices 3 weeks after it happened, still in shock. Still processing. She'd been staying with a friend off colony. Couldn't even go back to her home because there wasn't a home anymore. Just a crater. Vorak closed his eyes. She asked to speak with whoever was handling the diplomatic response. My supervisor tried to shield me. I was junior staff then, not prepared for something like that. But she insisted. Said she needed to talk to someone young enough to still believe things could change. Chen's voice remained steady, but something in his posture shifted. Shoulders curved inward slightly, hands clasped together. She sat in our office for 4 hours. Told me about her husband, xenobotanist, working on crop adaptation for harsh environments. Told me about her daughter, 9 years old, obsessed with learning new languages, could already speak 3 human dialects plus basic Velthar, told me about her son, 6 years old, shy, loved building things from scrap materials. "Stop," Vorak whispered. She showed me pictures.
Videos? Homework assignments her daughter had written?
A toy spacecraft her son had made from wire and bottle caps. She made me see them as people, not as casualties. Not as acceptable losses in a military calculation. As people. Chen leaned forward slightly. And then she asked me something I've never forgotten. She asked me what kind of person orders an attack on civilians and then sleeps peacefully afterward. She wanted to know if you were a monster, or if you were someone who'd convinced himself that numbers on a strategic display weren't real. "I was following orders," Vorak said hoarsely. "I know." She guessed that too. And you know what she said? Chen's voice dropped lower. She said if you were just following orders, then you could learn to see differently. That maybe somewhere under the military conditioning and strategic thinking there was someone capable of understanding what you'd done. That's naive, maybe. But she asked us to try anyway. Not for her sake. She said she'd never forgive you. But for the sake of the next colony. The next group of civilians who might face someone like you. She wanted you to become living proof that people can change, that understanding can be learned. That the galaxy doesn't have to keep cycling through the same violence forever. Zalareth found herself unable to look away. Chen's recounting carried none of the diplomatic polish she'd expected. This was raw. Personal. The kind of testimony that shouldn't happen during official proceedings. And yet it felt more genuine than any formal statement. So that's why, Chen continued. That's why 10 years of rehabilitation instead of execution. Because Dr. Mitchell, who had more right to demand your death than anyone, asked us to try something harder, something that might actually matter. Vorak was openly weeping now, his translator rendering the sounds as anguished clicks and whistles. "I can't do this. I can't spend 10 years. You can. 'Cause you have to." Chen stood, brushing off his uniform, and because somewhere in all that pain, you might become someone worth saving. Not for my sake. Not even for yours. For everyone who comes after. # the transport arrival, the warning chime echoed through the complex, 3 ascending tones that signaled incoming spacecraft. Zalareth checked the chronometer on a wrist display. Either human pilots were efficient or desperate to complete this uncomfortable mission quickly. "I need to move him to the loading dock," Chen said. He looked at Vorak with clinical assessment. "Can you walk?" "No. Can't or won't? Does it matter?" Vorak remained flat against the stone, defeat radiating from every scale. "Call your guards, have them drag me. I'd prefer you maintain some dignity." Chen's voice carried no mockery. "But if you can't walk, I have a transport chair on the ship." "Dignity." Vorak laughed bitterly. "You strip everything else away but want me to keep dignity." "I want you to remember you're still a person." Chen crouched beside him again. "That's the whole point. You don't get to become a monster. You don't get to be less than what you are. You stay fully aware, fully conscious, fully responsible." Zalareth signaled Thex, who moved forward with practiced efficiency. Together with Chen, they maneuvered Vorak into a sitting position. The general's body felt like dead weight, not physically incapacitated, but mentally shut down. "Come on," Chen said quietly. One step at a time. They hauled Vorak to his feet. He swayed but remained upright, supported between Chen on one side and Thex on the other. His claws scraped against the stone as they began the slow walk toward the exit. Zalareth followed, Kess trailing behind with the documentation tablets. The corridor felt longer than before. Each footstep echoed against vaulted ceilings that had witnessed thousands of executions over centuries. Quick deaths. Mercy, in its traditional form. This felt wrong, and yet she couldn't articulate why exactly. Couldn't explain why letting Vorak die would somehow be worse than this extended punishment. They emerged onto the loading dock as the human transport descended through atmospheric shields. Small vessel, maybe 40 meters long, more shuttle than proper ship. Plain gray exterior with minimal markings, nothing military about it. "That's your custody transport?" Zalareth couldn't hide her surprise. "I expected something more formal. Medical transport," Chen explained. "Configured for long-duration patient care. We have 4 staff aboard, 2 medical, 2 security, all trained in xenopsychology and trauma counseling. The ship touched down with barely a whisper of thruster burn. Excellent piloting. The boarding ramp extended smoothly, and 2 humans in medical whites descended, both young, probably mid-20s in human terms, both moving with the careful confidence of people trained for difficult situations. Ambassador Chen. The taller one, female, dark-skinned, wearing medical insignia Zalrith didn't recognize, approached with a data tablet. Dr. Amara Washington. I'll be primary care physician during transport. Dr. Washington. Chen released his hold on Vorak, letting Thex take the full weight. Patient presents with severe psychological stress but physically stable. I've completed preliminary examination. Full report on your tablet. Washington glanced at Vorak with professional assessment. No anger. No judgment. Just medical evaluation. Can you understand me, General? Vorak didn't respond. General Vorak, she tried again. I'm Dr. Perry and Josh Moe. Washington. I'll be monitoring your health during the journey to Colony 3. Do you have any medical conditions I should be aware of? Medication requirements? Allergies? Just kill me, Vorak whispered. That's not going to happen. Washington made notes on her tablet. But I need to know if you have any physical health concerns that require immediate attention. He has no registered medical conditions, Zareth interjected. My staff provided full health records as part of the transfer documentation. Thank you, Your Majesty. Washington glanced up, meeting Zareth's gaze directly. I still need to hear from him. Patient consent and all that. The casualness of it startled Zalrith, this young human doctor, addressing a queen as if they were equals. Focusing on the prisoner's comfort rather than diplomatic protocol. Different. All of this was so different. General, Washington said again, I am required by medical ethics to inform you of your rights. You have the right to refuse treatment except where such refusal would result in immediate death or permanent harm. You have the right to understand any medication or procedure before it's administered. You have the right to dignity and privacy during your care. Do you understand these rights? Vorak finally looked up. Rights. While I'm being shipped off to torture. While you're being transported to rehabilitation, Washington corrected gently. And yes, you maintain basic rights throughout the process. This isn't punishment. It's treatment. Treatment for what? Being a war criminal? Treatment for having convinced yourself that other people's lives don't matter? Washington's voice remained professionally calm. It's a surprisingly common condition, usually treatable with time and proper intervention. Accelereth felt something shift in her understanding. These humans weren't approaching this as punishment at all. They genuinely believed Vorak was sick, that his actions stemmed from a condition that could be addressed through therapy and forced confrontation with consequences. Insane. Or revolutionary. Possibly both. The second human descended the ramp. Male, younger, carrying medical equipment. He set up a portable scanner and began running baseline readings on Vorak without ceremony. Vitals stable, he announced. Elevated stress hormones, but within expected parameters. No immediate medical concerns. Thank you, Marcus. Washington made more notes. General, we're going to walk you onto the ship now. There's a medical bay configured for your species. Gravity adjusted, temperature controlled, proper atmospheric mix. You'll have privacy except during examination periods. I'll explain the full care plan once we're underway. Vorak didn't move. Couldn't, perhaps. The fight had gone out of him completely. Chen and Marcus maneuvered him toward the ramp. Zalrith watched the careful way they supported his weight, ensuring he didn't stumble or fall. Not rough. Not aggressive. Just practical. Halfway up the ramp, Vorak stopped. Your Majesty. Zalrith moved closer. General? I served you for 17 years. His voice cracked. 17 years of loyalty. Of victories. And this is how it ends. She had no answer. What could she say? That his service mattered? It had, once. Before Colony 7. Before the civilians. Before everything changed. I know, she said finally. Inadequate. But true. Vorak nodded slowly, then continued up the ramp without resistance. The 2 medical staff guided him into the ship's interior. Chen remained at the ramp's base, watching them disappear. That's everyone, Washington called down. We're secure for departure. Ambassador, are you riding with us or taking separate transport? Separate, Chen said. I'll meet you at Colony 3. I have diplomatic business here first. Understood. ETA 40 hours. The ramp began to retract. Zalrith stepped back, giving the ship clearance space. The loading dock felt suddenly vast. Just her, Chen, Thex, and Kess in a space designed for massive cargo transfers. "Ambassador," she said as the ship's engines hummed to life. A moment." Chen turned to face her fully. Behind him, the transport lifted slowly, repulsors glowing blue. "Your Majesty? This is precedent," she said quietly. "What you've done here today. Every species in the territories will study this. We'll evaluate whether humans are allies or threats based on how the situation resolves. I know. If Vorak dies in custody, if he escapes, if this rehabilitation fails spectacularly, then humanity's reputation in the galaxy is destroyed." Chen's expression remained neutral. "I'm aware. We discussed the risks extensively before invoking treaty rights." The ship cleared the dock, rising through atmospheric shields into the pale sky above. Zalrith watched until it became a speck, then a memory. Carrying her disgraced general toward an uncertain fate, "Why take such a risk?" she asked. "Your species could have demanded military compensation, trade concessions, territorial rights. Instead, you chose this, something that might not even work." Chen was quiet for a long moment, watching the sky where the transport had vanished. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of every name he'd recited earlier. "Because we're tired of civilizations built on acceptable losses. We're tired of calculated cruelty. We're tired of wars that end with clean executions and everyone pretending the dead were necessary sacrifices." He turned to face her directly. "Maybe this fails. Maybe Vorak never changes. Maybe we've wasted time and resources on nothing, but at least we tried something other than adding more bodies to the ledger and calling it justice." Zalrith studied his face, those strange human features that showed everything: pain, determination, fear, hope, all visible to anyone who looked carefully. "You're gambling your entire species' future on optimism," she said. "No." Chen shook his head slightly. "We're gambling on the possibility that understanding matters more than revenge. That's not optimism. That's just refusing to accept that the galaxy has to stay broken forever." He bowed, shallow, respectful, but not subservient, and turned toward the diplomatic transport area. Kess hurried to follow him, still clutching her tablets. Zalrith stood alone on the loading dock with Thex. Above them, the sky had darkened to evening. Stars began emerging through atmospheric haze, thousands of them, each one representing systems and species and civilizations that had existed long before humanity discovered fire. "What do you think?" she asked Thex quietly. Her shield-bearer considered carefully before responding. "I think, Your Majesty, that we have just witnessed either the birth of new form of justice or the most elaborate suicide I've ever seen." "Yes," she agreed softly. "But which?" Thex had no answer. Neither did she. But as she made her way back through the corridors toward her throne room, Zalrith found herself thinking about names. About 816 children who'd been reduced to casualty reports. About Dr. Mitchell and her impossible request. About whether understanding could truly be taught, or if some lessons came too late to matter, and whether humanity's gamble on mercy that looked like cruelty would reshape the galaxy, or simply become another cautionary tale about species too naive to survive the dark between stars. Only time would tell. And time, she knew, moved slowly when it came to answering questions that mattered.